All right, everybody. This is for core students, your opportunity to get the notes for today. Either you can write these down, pause the video and write this information down here, or you can just download the notes yourself, print them out, and then maintain your information that way. So it's up to you. You decide, excuse me, about what you want to do and how you want to copy these down. So the whole discussion today is going to be about how does Hitler, one of the dictators we talked about the past 2 days, how does he come into this area as to where he becomes this major power in Germany? Obviously, we talked yesterday how he built up the military. He has zero unemployment in his country. He is someone who is not to be messed with from a country standpoint. So how does he get to that point, and how does he force the hand? So before we get into how does this kind of war really set this table for beginning, in World War II, we have to talk about remembering about what the Versailles Treaty did for the Germans, whether it was good or bad, and then elaborate some of the details. So if you think about this yourself, was it good or bad? And think of some of the details here, because I want to move on and kind of get to some of the discussion parts of this here in terms of how the Treaty of Versailles was just super harsh to the Germans. All right, so but that discussion question is one we had in class, so I'm just trying to make it as light the class as possible. But at the end of World War I, the Germans were essentially kept out of the negotiations. And when negotiations were over and the treaty was finally prepared and ready, the Germans were asked to come into the room, sign what was there, not really read through it, and say, you have to accept everything on this treaty, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Germany had to accept war guilt, and they also had to accept financial responsibility for the damages done in Europe, which are equal to $33 billion, which is the number that was decided in the conference. The German had to reduce its army to 100,000 men. They were to have no air force, and they were to have no submarines. They were also going to lose a lot of land too, specifically this section here. All right, and again, like we talked about yesterday and Monday, Hitler's power comes from the idea that he's using the frustrations of the German people to get what he wants, to be able to, see how those frustrations can be directed towards rebuilding. And that's exactly what he does. He rebuilds the military. He rebuilds parts of Germany. And what happens is once his military is what he thinks is strong enough, he's going to take a major gamble to begin taking back the territory that was lost, starting with this area circled on the screen that you see, and that's known as the Rhineland. This territory was taken from Germany. It was the industrial hub. Germany wanted it back. They needed it back. So Germany is able to march 30,000 troops in, taking a gamble that the French and the British will not respond, because if they do respond, Germany doesn't stand much of a chance. Fortunately for Hitler, though, and he's sitting at his headquarters, listening to the reports coming in on the radio about how successful this invasion is of the Rhineland, and the fact that there is no response from the British, no response from the French, it tells him that he gambled, and his gamble paid off. He had no shots fired to conquer this territory. Germany now has this territory back, and the more Germany begins to take, he also begins to take what you see down here in this section of the map of Austria. All right, this section down there is exactly what Hitler wanted to take as well. He marched into that country. Not a single shot was fired. He annexes and takes that country as well. This is alarming to French and the British, but many people, instead of mobilizing their armed forces and the militaries, begin to think to themselves, did we punish Germany too harshly in this treaty? This is exactly what Hitler wants. Hitler knows he has a military power. He knows he can use it and throw his weight around. And he knows Britain and France will not want to stand up to him, because he knows that above all else, Britain and France do not want war. So he's using that to his advantage. The fact that he has a military, he'll be willing to go to war. And Britain and France do not have the military and do not want to go to war. So he uses that to his advantage. All right. Now he comes to areas that you see in the maroon on the page. All right, you have those parts are German-speaking Czechoslovakians. They live in Czechoslovakia, but they're German-speaking. So they have more cultural similarity to Germany than they do with Czechoslovakia. So Hitler wants to include these people into the country and that territory as well. There's a lot of factories in that territory. There's a lot of resources there in that small territory you see in the maroon on the map. Hitler wants to make that a part of Germany. So he begins to make preparations to move forward. Well, he has a request from Britain and France to discuss about this territory, because again, Britain and France want to try to make things right from the Versailles Treaty, which they thought was too harsh, and then now they're trying to trace back their steps to try to almost ask for forgiveness. All right. So in this appeasement here, I'll put all this up here so you can start taking it down. Neville Chamberlain, who's British Prime Minister at the time period, met with Hitler several times to resolve this issue. Hitler continued to ask for this territory. Neville Chamberlain continued to, leave the discussion open. But by the end of the meetings that they have, Hitler gets Sudetenland. But in return, Neville Chamberlain gets a promise from Hitler that he will go no further than a Sudetenland. All right. And Chamberlain, as a result, pushed for appeasement. Now, appeasement of Germany is it's the definition of appeasement is giving in to a competitor's demands. All right. The reason why Neville Chamberlain gives in is because he knows his citizens in Great Britain do not want another war against Germany. That first war against Germany that they just fought 20 years prior was devastating to them. So they realize that they need to make sure that doesn't happen again. Hitler begins to increase demands after these peace agreements are signed, and as a result, Chamberlain continues to almost ignore, knowing that the peace agreement has to hold true. If you sign a peace agreement, you expect both sides to uphold their end of the deal. Unfortunately for Neville Chamberlain, after the peace agreement is signed, he gets permission essentially to take the Sudetenland outside of the outskirts of Czechoslovakia. Chamberlain returns to Britain after this conference as a hero for keeping the peace, because that's what the country wanted. Hitler, 2 months after this peace agreement is signed, violates the agreement and actually invades the whole of Czechoslovakia. All right, if you're not sure exactly what that is, that's this whole entire country here. All right, so he has this entire section that he invades. He gets this part, then 2 months later he invades. So that's kind of showing you exactly how daft Hitler really was, to know that Chamberlain of Great Britain and France, they're not going to stand up to him. All right, they don't have the militaries. Winston Churchill, a very vocal opponent of appeasement, believed that Britain should meet Hitler with their might, not with appeasement. You can read the quote here. A really good movie, if you want to watch this, is called The Darkest Hour. It's about Winston Churchill's rise to the prime minister position in Great Britain, and how he deals with Hitler from then on out. Essentially, Churchill doesn't really do much to ease the tension between Great Britain and Germany. But what Churchill does do, he leads Great Britain through World War II, and this movie covers several month long period where Churchill becomes prime minister. He deals with infighting within his own party, and then also has to deal with this guy in Germany, as in Hitler, that is seeking to dominate all of Europe. Okay, so when you look at this goal here, and this is something that if you download the notes, you can see this. But what you can do is, you can definitely see in this book, if you give a moose a muffin, click on the link, it'll read through the book for you. This is almost a children's-like story as to how Chamberlain, when he treated Hitler, it's like how history repeats itself. If you give a moose a muffin, if you give in to someone's demands, they're going to keep wanting more and more and more. All right, so keep that in mind. These are our notes today. Everyone have a fantastic day. Again, go back to the notes if you want to copy stuff down.